When stories and tales are told of the many legends of the fairies or the wee folk, many of us tend to get a beautiful image of the emerald green fields of Ireland or the rich pastures in the highlands of bonny Scotland. While a lot of the mythology and folklore of these countries is based around these wee folk, most of us wouldn't be aware that the majority of Native American tribes in both Canada and the US have had their very own strong belief in the little people. Granted, every culture has their own interpretation of fairies or little people, but when the connection the Native Americans have with nature and the way that they are so tuned into Mother Earth, one can only see why there are similarities in their beliefs to the ancient Celts and ancient Europeans. July 1934 certainly created a mystery when two miners by the names of Cecil Mayne and Frank Carr accidentally came across something other than the gold they were searching for. Following a particular seam of gold into the rock face, they had to blast the rock to continue their quest. When the dust settled, to their disappointment, what was revealed was not gold, but a small cave measuring 15 foot long by 4 foot wide. Mayne and Carr discovered an unexpected treasure of a different kind inside the cave, for inside was the remains of a small human being sitting upright on a shelf inside the cave. The human was no more than 6.5 inches tall, in a seated cross-legged position, with his arm wrapped around his waist. Although brown, wrinkled and weathered, this little creature had been very well preserved by the nature of its environment, and his flesh and fingernails remained intact. Apart from the anomalous size of the body, there were other unusual features. One of these was that the head was coated in a gelatinous material. Underneath this gel-like substance, the facial features were distorted or disfigured. The nose and skull were flattened, giving the appearance of a very low, flat forehead. The eyes were heavy-lidded and bulged from their sockets. Over the years, the mummy, which became known as Pedro, was sold to numerous businessmen who displayed him as a sideshow attraction until he finally disappeared in the 1950s. However, before Pedro vanished, some got the chance to perform a number of rudimentary scientific tests. These tests brought forward many theories as to Pedro's origin. Some of the experts believed that Pedro was the only remaining evidence of a lost Native American pygmy race. While the body was indeed small at 6.5 inches, little Pedro had a full set of small adult teeth, which shocked the researchers. If we were to take the accounts of Pedro's discovery at face value, then would that be proof of the little people? Could this be connected to the legends of fairies and wee folk all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Ireland and Europe? The indigenous Shoshone tribe called the legendary little people Nimrigar. They believed that this race of people lived in the Rocky Mountains, in particular the Pedro Mountains. It is said that the Nimrigar were very protective of their homes and would use weapons such as bows and poisonous arrows to defend themselves from unwelcome guests. Many have theorized over the years that Pedro was one of the Nimrigar, as he certainly fits the paradigm. The Choctaw natives also had their legend and belief in the little people, and they were called the Kua-Anakasha. There was a genuine fear of the Kua-Anakasha, as there were many tales of them snatching the little boys of the tribe and taking them to the caves to test their spirit. Then we have the beautiful state of Hawaii, where the natives also believed in a race of little people they called the Menehune. With their beliefs being very similar with the Shoshone's Nimrigar and the Eskasoni's little people of Nova Scotia, is it possible that there is some basis to the stories of this very unusual race? The Menehune were believed to reside in the untouched mountains and forests of the Hawaii Islands, and legend says that they were the original inhabitants of the islands long before the Polynesian people ever landed. The Cherokee tribe believed there were 3 kinds of people on the land. The first of them were known as the Laurels. According to legends, they were quite friendly, but had a mischievous edge to them and would play tricks on the adults to keep laughter and humour at high. It was said this was to keep us young and happy of heart, just like them. Then there were the Dogwood people. These were said to be kind-hearted and looked out for us and enjoyed taking care of us. These people have often been related to the Scottish Brownies. Then there were the rock people. Totally different in nature, as they were seen as having a darker undertone, sinister and vengeful. They would wreak havoc if they felt threatened or thought their territory was being invaded. Many missing children were attributed to the insidious rock people. The rock connection is an element we see crossing into some sections of the fringe research fields. David Pauldys, in his work for Missing 411, has gone on record to state a greater number of people have gone missing in boulder fields than anywhere else. These creatures that slip themselves through rock faces, boulder fields, mountains, caves and tunnels all possess an intrinsic connection to rock and are found worldwide. In Ireland, beings previously known as the Sidhe would appear on remote landscapes, and even I've witnessed their appearance and equal disappearance on remote parts of the island of Ireland, leaving behind years of great mystery to detangle. However, the clue was in the word, not their appearance. She has been suggested with the term applied to the beings. However, in later research, this is not quite right. She was the name of the stone structures in which they came through into this world, the old passage chambers of old, built before the Great Pyramids of Egypt. I often wondered why the blasted doorways were that small, these former seats of an entry to the human world. The ancient miners of Germany had their own names for them, horrid creatures that could sometimes do good but in others bring death. These small creatures morphed their way into Middle English around the 13th century and became known as goblins, three-fingered buggers that possessed a disdain for the human race. Again, the clue is in the word. Goblin is derived from the French gobelin, and in turn is derived from the German kobold, whose root is kobe, K-O-B-E, meaning hollow in rock. So here we find this connection back to the rocks. In Ireland, the oldest depiction we have of a Celtic cross, which is actually the aerial view of the inside of a Neolithic passage chamber, which can be seen at Newgrange, for instance, and is carved in the walls of the old abbey in County Offaly. The depiction clearly shows three heads on the points of the cross, with their mouths open, giving the impression of possibly producing some type of chant or tone. And from the centre of the passage chamber opens into a spiral, and from the spiral a giant serpent, the original form of a dragon which has become distorted over the years. The gatekeepers to the other worlds. The being which shared knowledge between us and them. A being which was not a representation of our own spiritual kundalini or anything of that nature, but rather something very real. So what of these three tones? In Japan, a similar connection to stone can be found with these strange entities. Within the Shugendo tradition, it is believed you leave behind the ordinary world and go to sacred mountains and caves to meet beings that come through the stone. An interesting side note can be found in the older Bibles, not the newer versions which have been altered. In Matthew 4, verse 8, it reads, "Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them." One should note, he was taken into the mountain, not onto the mountain. Back in Japan, on approaching the sacred areas and calling on the deities identified in Shugendo, the Yamabushi priests blow on a conical shell, which has been altered to be used as a horn. These produce three distinct notes, and in particular order. The first is a short, low tone. This lower tone, symbolically, is like the doorbell being pushed, with the subsequent two other tones being played in a specific order, possibly signifying who is calling, and these range from 221 Hz, 457 Hz, and 602 Hz approximately. When inside a cave or a stone structure, sound will carry much faster through denser material, especially the lower tones. When the tones are played through the medium of air, they will travel at 343 meters per second. However, when using stone, These sounds can travel at a tremendous speed of 5,971 meters per second. Are we looking at a simple matter of harmonics within the rocks and cave systems? A resonant frequency, much like two tuning forks when close enough to each other. When one rings, the other will vibrate in sympathy. Is this the key to the doorways reportedly witnessed by countless observers in the field? Although there is a connection with the sun with some of the places, I feel it's more important to consider our timing at such locations, as timing is everything. For centuries, our ancestors have reported on strange and bizarre phenomena reported during twilight. Having practiced this myself, I tend to arrive at a location an hour before twilight and get settled in for the show to begin. Being there in daylight doesn't manifest near as much activity, nor does nightfall. During the hours of twilight, I have witnessed beings appear, light phenomena, etc., etc. In September 2016, I headed an expedition into the remote part of the Irish landscape where tales of such had occurred in the past. Having had my own experiences there, I wanted to see if a group of people would possibly deter the phenomena, or if the numbers wouldn't matter. 8 others joined the expedition, including a reporter from the UK. To my surprise, and to those who joined us, beings did appear on the hill, and voices could be heard from various locations over the hilltop. However, it didn't end there. On returning to the base camp, the site was invaded during the night, coming on the back of a mighty wind, and I will never forget the sound of their feet passing by the tent as my hair stood on its end. The reporter stated in her subsequent article, "We didn't have to go searching for the Fae, because they came to us." And one other sobering remark she wrote, "The fear also infected the dogs, who were certainly not happy." In 2020, I am setting out on another expedition to a location said to be as equally challenging, and for those interested in joining us, can reach me through the usual channels. In Iceland, these beings are known as the Huldufolk and live in mounds and rocks. The belief is so strong that a Conservation Act was introduced in 1990 in Iceland with a clause protecting sites traditionally deemed to have supernatural significance, providing that they have been associated with this phenomenon for at least 100 years. The Crow natives in the United States have a belief in a race of people called the Nirumbi. It is believed this race lived in the Pryor Mountains and was a reason many of the visions the Crow chief Plentycus had. One of the many visions the little people bestowed on the chief instilled the belief that the Nirumbi were responsible for keeping the Crow safe and together. To this day, if any Crow natives pass through the Pryor Gap, they will leave offerings to the Nirumbi to honour the protection they once gave the tribe. Encounters with these creatures are countless and worldwide. But as we started with the Native American tales, I think it only fitting that we end there. A lot of the stories are captivating and include an array of tales of how the little people often came to aid the tribes in times of great need. It is said that the little people were very frustrated as they were seen as something to be feared, but it seems there was good reason for some of these fears, as they were extremely unpredictable and mysterious to the Native Americans. The majority of the legends and different accounts of sightings and encounters are clear enough to understand that no matter who encountered them, they all have the commonality of looking and behaving basically the same. There is a theory that when Caucasian man arrived from Europe, they brought these entities with them from their own native lands. These entities may have many names, such as pixies, fairies, brownies, gnomes, little people, and many more. The arrival of the Europeans has certainly created a multicultural society among us humans. Therefore, is it possible there is a melting pot within the fairy realm too? No matter what we believe, we cannot dismiss the many accounts from past and present cultures of these encounters and the common belief that there was a race and is a race of little people in existence long before the invasion of Caucasian man in the Americas. Whoever or whatever this race of little people actually are, we may never know, But one thing is for certain. As humanity evolves over the generations and our technology and academia advances, we should never cast a scornful eye over our ancients and their beliefs. They may have had a very basic and rudimentary lifestyle that we see as redundant now, but they certainly had a wisdom and knowledge of the land and its inhabitants that extends far beyond our comprehension. In today's modern age, we might scorn the legends and belief systems of our ancient past as nothing more than lore. But there are still many reported sightings from both native and new Americans of encounters and interactions with these little people or fairies to this day. One account tells of a woman and her children enjoying a peaceful picnic in the forest. It started with the mother hearing what sounded like enchanting music, but not like any kind of music she had ever heard before. She had not seen anyone in the area at all in the whole time that they were there, and no one lived in the vicinity. So this in itself was odd. The music got closer and closer and louder, and the children confirmed that they too could hear it. Making the decision to pack up and leave seems to have been a good one, as when she was hurriedly clambering her children into the car, she told them not to look back. Her daughter, who was now an adult, did not take this advice and turned around. She never told anyone what she witnessed that day for years, for fear of mockery, but it seems that what she saw was a circle of little people smiling and dancing together quite gleefully. When she finally divulged what she had witnessed that day, she was still quite notably apprehensive that she could possibly bring about bad luck by telling her encounter with the fairies.
The world of legend is sometimes just that, but sometimes we really have to ask ourselves, are there actual flames underneath all the smoke?
Do the tales of encounters with these beings crossing our paths possess a weight of truth? Can we bring ourselves to acknowledge that it is plausible in a world now ruled by technology? The Japanese Yamabushi priests recognize when we leave the trappings of the modern world behind and enter the world of nature, the rules change. For many of us who continue to explore nature will possibly walk a lifetime and experience nothing unusual. And for others, listed in the cases of David Paulding's work, they've never come back.
I'm a pitfall for you, baby. I'm a pitfall for you, darling. I'm a pitfall for you, baby. I'm a pitfall, yeah, yeah. I'm a pitfall for you, baby.